Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Young and Wiped Up. This is Marcella.
And I'm Gabby.
And thanks for joining us this week for another episode.
If you cannot get enough of Young and Wiped Up and you are angry that we're not posting twice a week, well, guess what? There is an entire catalog of bonus episodes and blog posts and so much more ready for you at patreon.com/youngandwifedup. There are 3 different tiers that unlock different bonus content, and it is a great way to support our podcast and give us a little monthly change.
If you want another way to kind of join in our community, we also have a Facebook group for the podcast. Lots of like-minded women that you can meet online, chat with. You can submit episode ideas. We do polls. We're doing a spring cleaning challenge right now where you can win a $20 Amazon Prime gift card. Is that
Yes.
what it is?
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to get plugged into that, we do have a Facebook group as well if you don't want to do the Patreon. But obviously, patrons are slightly superior because they do get the extra content. So,
Yes.
But joining the Facebook group is still just a great way to show your support and get connected with the community.
Yes, we love the Facebook group, and thank you to everybody that participates all the time in our Facebook group and shares their prayer requests and everything. We love to get to know you guys better that way. So speaking of the Facebook group, I put out a call recently to our Facebook group members asking if you guys have any episode requests. Every once in a while, we will put out episode requests. We don't do it all the time because sometimes Marcel and I already know what we want to chat about, but sometimes we're like a little bit stuck and we need some re-inspiration. And this particular episode was requested quite a few times. And I've actually even had it requested to me personally, people asking me, can Marcella please talk about this? We really want her to talk about this because Marcella has a unique perspective being on the younger side. She's, you're now in your late 20s. Sorry, dude. You're with me up here. But you had your first baby in your early 20s and you have 3 Earthside children, and you've had 3 unique postpartum experiences. And one of the biggest thing that I hear from girlfriends and even you guys online on Facebook is how on earth can we bounce back and get into our homemaking rhythm or just any rhythm at all after having another baby or even your first baby. So Marcella, this episode is all you. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy because this is also great for me to learn when we have our first baby too, Lord willing. So I'm going to let you take the reins and I'm just going to enjoy this episode with all of you.
Okay, so postpartum is a very broad term. Like if you've ever had a baby, you are postpartum forever. Even if you had a baby 25 years ago, you are still technically in postpartum. So there's obviously, times in your life where a lot of routines and things it's going to be a lot of ebb and flow. But if we're talking about like newly postpartum, I think there are some things that are more important, obviously, than trying to jump back into housekeeping, full-blown home management, like right back, diving right into everything again. There is an ebook from a pre- and postnatal herbalist that I've been using as a resource for years. and it's Little Yarrow's Botanical Medicine for New Mothers. And she places a special emphasis on new mothers who are breastfeeding. And I love what she says at the beginning of her content or her ebook that she has. And I quote, "A newborn mother's only two jobs are falling in love and learning to breastfeed," end quote. And yes, I think this still applies if you're on your first baby or your eighth baby. So, with that being said, there is something particularly helpful and necessary about truly resting those first 6 weeks. And I've always found that I am more ready with my energy, with my time, um, with kind of how I'm able to juggle things and manage them. I'm more ready to start incorporating my home management tasks back in, like with better tools, steadier footing, when I'm not trying to sneak work back in too soon postpartum. Now, I understand that there are times where it's like, well, I can't sit on my couch the first 40 days after I have a baby. That was actually my experience with my first and my third son. My second, I was able to rest for a little bit longer because my husband was able to take a little bit more time off. But with my first baby, I think my husband maybe had a week and a half off. And then with my third baby, it was about the same. He had maybe a week and a half off. And so obviously, at a certain point, it's like, okay, things still technically need to get done after a certain point. Ideally, if you can rest and be in bed for, that, what is the saying? It's like on your bed for the first 5 days and then like next to your bed the next 5 days or something like that. There's kind of like, a ritual with postpartum that they recommend to new mothers. And sometimes that's not always possible. But as much as you can, if you're newly postpartum with a brand new, fresh, like baby smelling baby, the babiest smelling baby that you can possibly have, um, this is not the priority. Your priority is not to get your routines going and to make your plans and to start doing your zone cleaning again and to, get your time blocking in your schedule and like all. It's not the time. It can wait. It should wait. And I think the more children you have, it is literally like time speeds up. You want to just snuggle your baby. You should just be snuggling your baby, learning to breastfeed, falling in love. I really love that advice. So that's kind of my like pre-disclaimer to like everything I'm going to talk about. Now, if you are maybe a little bit further out from postpartum, and I mean, maybe you're hitting the 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 month mark. Sometimes it takes a little longer to recover and to kind of get out of the newborn fog. I feel like I've had different recovery periods with each baby. But if you feel like you're okay, breastfeeding is going well, my milk supply is regulated, we're kind of in a rhythm now with a new baby, especially if you have older children, multiple kids, and all of that. And you want to start getting back into it. This is kind of where we slowly start incorporating things back into your home management. So, I want to talk about 4 specific pain points of obstacles you might run into when you are trying to get this ball rolling again. So the first thing is figuring out new systems. So you have to figure out what the bare bones are of keeping your house and your sanity afloat. For me, and I think for most other mothers, it's going to be dishes, laundry, and meals on the table. Those are going to be like the main 3 things. If absolutely nothing else gets done, those three need to happen. So if you are just struggling to do dishes and laundry and to get decently healthy meals on the table, and I'm not saying like you can't ever use frozen meals or anything, but it shouldn't be the norm. That should be something that comes in when, it's been a really tough day and you just, it's been a hard day with the baby, colic, and like whatever it is that's going on. Um, that is not the time to add in extra things like insane amounts of meal planning or insane amounts of reorganizing or insane amounts of decluttering or deep cleaning your whole house for hours every week. That's not the time to do it. You have to focus on the bare bones, the dishes, the laundry, meals on the table. And you have to figure out what that is. I'm pretty sure that's going to be most mothers' answers, though, is that those things are going to kind of keep the wheels turning for now. The other thing is asking your husband what makes him feel like the home is also not in shambles. And most of the time, they're probably going to say dishes, laundry, or meals, which I've noticed with each postpartum. It's been a little bit different with each one. Like, okay, as long as the dishes are clean or the kitchen is somewhat tidied up at the end of the day, that helps my husband have somewhat of a peaceful place to come home to after work and all of that. We can relax and that sort of thing, or if it's laundry, whatever it is. Because it's not just you living there, it's your husband and your children too. Another thing is if you've now gotten your bare bones figured out, decluttering is going to save you so much time because you can't clean clutter. You have to get rid of stuff. Um, and this has been, thankfully, something that's come very easily to me. I sometimes feel like I err on the side of not being sentimental enough with my items that, I need to hang on to this because this is going to like mean something really important in, 20 years from now. But it really does help keep things in control. So even if it's starting with one corner of your house that just like it's piled up with stuff, like taking 15 minutes to declutter every single day. Like what little time can you use? 7 minutes. Like it can be so small, but it will amount to a lot at the end. Build in a new housekeeping task or routine in intervals. So if you have your bare bones down, now you can start adding in maybe things like your zone cleaning or a more extensive meal planning system or a more detailed laundering schedule or if you're homeschooling, a more detailed homeschooling schedule now. And it can be, okay, you take it week by week. How did I do adding in this new routine back into my home management? Okay, it didn't work out this time. Sometimes it really is. You're having to take it month by month, and you need more time in between adding those tasks back in. And you have to add them in slowly. You can't just go from, okay, I have my bare bones now, and now I'm going to dump all of the extra stuff in next week. That's not how it works. You have to do one, maybe two things. I would say even two, like extra, like bigger picture homemaking things at a time is probably not going to be sustainable. And I'll kind of go into why this is not the greatest idea. Um, let's see here. Just checking my notes. I think that's pretty much all I had for new systems. Yeah, putting things back in place slowly, adding those things in. I know it can be very tempting when you feel like you have a really good day. And you're like, man, I'm on top of it. Like, of course I can add in a new thing. But then 2 days later, something happens, and then you're like, okay, it's probably better that I'm taking it slowly and I am making sure that my homemaking is sustainable for me. It's sustainable for my time and energy that I can invest into it for my family and your specific situation. The next thing I want to talk about is calling in help. Um, when you're newly postpartum, this is hopefully a given that you have some kind of in-house help, whether it be for um, caretaking for your other children, or if it is to help with some of the bare bones things, especially if you're recovering from birth, you should not be doing lots of dishes and laundry and all of that bare bones stuff. Like it should wait, it should be delegated to somebody else. So obviously, it's a temporary situation. You're not going to be in this vulnerable state forever. But when it comes to we're past the point of like newly newborn stage, um, and you feel like you need to call in help now because you are drowning in the work and you can't quite get your footing yet, and you're like, it's time for me to get this back on track, and I'm really struggling with doing this. First of all, know that you are not in an ideal situation. So you have to look at currently what's going on, what's the state of the home, what's the state of managing the home, the things that are falling through the cracks, and to be able to say, I'm not where I want to be and I need help. I need to outsource, I need to delegate, I need to ask for literal physical help. Um don't be afraid to do it. Obviously, we should be striving towards taking on more of the load ourselves when we are able and we feel like we can now add in those things slowly. And each postpartum period will be different, and each baby is going to be different. And so it's really only time will tell what the state of your home is going to be once you get kind of like out of that newborn fog. Um, if you have very little time in your day, use that for your high traffic areas, like when it comes to cleaning and tidying up. So for us, it's kitchen. I'm in the kitchen probably half of the day, if not more than that. The living room, because the boys play in the living room pretty much most of the day, and the dining room as well, because we have like an open concept home. So using what little time you have, and also getting your children to start habits of helping with cleaning up after themselves, cleaning up their toys, tidying up. And you guys, you can start so little. Like, you can start when they're like 10 months old, helping them with cleaning up, probably even younger than that. If they're able to like sit up on their own, and you can teach them how to pick up their toys and put them in a box or put them in a basket. That can be a huge help to you. Obviously, it like takes more time for you to like have your baby do it than you just pick everything up and just get it all done in one go. But you will have a return on your investment of your time later on in leaps and bounds, I promise you. Okay, back to the kind of outsourcing. Discussing with your husband if outsourcing could help you temporarily until you are able to keep up with the demand. And like I said before, ideally, we should be able to get to a point where we feel like we can shoulder most, if not all, of the responsibility of the home managing, the housekeeping. In an ideal situation, you would be taking care of meals, cleaning, things having to do with the children, all that sort of thing. But when you have a baby in that first year, it can get really dicey because you really don't know what to expect. So asking or discussing with your husband if he thinks it would be helpful for you to delegate that to somebody else, and that can be in the form of enlisting the help of like maybe some young single women in your community to be a mother's helper while you kind of work out the kinks in your routine, and they can come in and kind of, you guys can be on double duty. One of you is on the kids, another one of you is taking care of a task to get the home under control to where it feels like um, the home environment is a little bit more peaceful, so that you do have that mental space now to plan, to maybe make some lists, prioritize. Because I feel like when there's so much going on in the house and it's just like a tornado went through it, and you feel like you can't possibly make any headway with the work that needs to be done. Having somebody come in to kind of be an extra set of grown up hands is super helpful in this instance. And further into that, I think there are times when it is appropriate to call in professional help when it's absolutely necessary. And this can be if you are in a kind of more extreme situation, if you need junk removal services, if you need house cleaning services to come in, laundering services, if you're having to maybe rely on grocery delivery for a while, even if pickup is too much for you to even get out of the house. I think there are absolutely times when it is necessary to, again, get the home environment back where it needs to be stable, peaceful, not just for you and your new baby, but for the other people that are living in your home. Um, Going further into this, I think a lot of the hang up with new mothers is facing their new reality head on and accepting the stage of life that they're in and what exactly it means for them, for their husband, for their homemaking, for their time and energy. And even if you feel like you've gone maybe from, you already have kids and adding in a new one, it still kind of throws a wrench in everything, obviously in the best way possible, because you have a new little one that, your family has welcomed in. But it can make things very difficult getting back into these routines. So know that when you are caring for small children, you may have a quote unquote new normal every 4 weeks, which can be a little intense for people who are more type A and they have their systems and routines and they know what works for them. And even more difficult if it's your first baby and you're used to being able to do things a certain way on a certain day at a certain time. You have your routine, you've been doing it for a while, and all of a sudden you have a baby and it's like, okay, we've settled into a rhythm, and then all of a sudden a month later you have to find a whole new routine. It's like getting used to, it's almost like you have to get used to the routine of having a new routine. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. And you have to accept that you will need to change your routines, your time blocking, your schedules, your lists, your priorities more often than you expect. And this is completely and totally normal. You cannot cling too hard to what's currently working. You have to work the system while it does the job, and you have to be flexible when it isn't anymore. So you have to be willing to make major changes within a day. Um, and this can be really good with character building, being patient with your skills of being able to like switch, go with the flow, kind of like on the dime, um, and not clinging so hard. Well, if I didn't get this done today, it means the house and everything is going to fall apart. And then you're just like an anxious, crying mess. And it's like, I'm a failure. And it's like, no, no, no. Like, this is you having to switch up your routine so often and having to find new home management systems on a pretty regular basis is not a defect of having children. It's just part of having very small kids and taking care of them, especially in that first year. So if you have an infant, you and your baby are going through the most change in that first year of life than both of you may ever again after that. So sleeping, eating, illness, how much comfort they need. Are you going to have to carry them around for hours and hours a day because they just don't want to be put down? It's going to be a roller coaster for a while. And again, it is easier to step into your new reality if you're accepting of it and you're expecting it to happen. So if you're already expecting the changes, you can stay one step ahead. So it should not come as a surprise to you if all of a sudden, after a couple of weeks, you have your rhythm down, you have your time blocking with when your cleaning is going to happen, when you're going to go run your errands, and all this different stuff, and then all of a sudden you have to change it all again. It's normal, and I understand it can be frustrating, because you feel like you finally got it down, and now we have to, like, switch things up again, and it can get a little overwhelming, but I promise the more you practice, the easier it gets, and that just comes with time, and just having a lot of grace for everybody in the situation, including yourself. A lot of our hangups can merely be the feeling of like needing to plan the system before working it. And sometimes we have to like let go of the over engineering and get to work. And this happens for people who like to make the plans. They like to make all their lists, and it has to be all this perfectly scheduled out thing before they actually do the work. If it's taking you longer to plan when you're going to wash the dishes than just doing the dishes, you're not doing it right. If it's taking you longer to plan when you're going to do this or how you're going to do that and the perfect way of doing X, Y, and Z in the home, you're not doing it right. It's better if you just throw that stuff out the window and just get to work. You may just have to walk in a room and look around and say, okay, well, I'm just going to start doing something. I'm going to pick it up. I'm going to tidy it. I'm going to dust. Like sometimes you just have to practice just getting on your feet and doing it instead of relying so much on I have to sit down and make the lists and do all the things and make sure that I have this perfect plan in order before I actually start my work. I feel like that can be a huge hang up as well. The last thing, when it comes to cleaning specifically, know that you are probably not in a place in your life right now where you can spend hours every week deep cleaning. And you may not be in that place for many years if you are having a lot of babies. So I know, like, before Jen and I had kids, I was able to do way more like detailed deep cleaning than I am now. Honestly, at this point, deep cleaning really isn't happening at this point. I can maybe focus on one very small task at a time, and maybe my whole home will be deep cleaned in a year's time, not in a Saturday afternoon kind of a thing. It has to be in small chunks of time because, we all know, those of us who have kids, that sometimes you literally really only have 5 minutes here and there to go and do something. And that's just the reality of having babies. Again, it's not a defect, it's just part of having babies. They're very needy for a reason. And some babies are easier than others. You may, be fortunate enough to have a baby who's pretty easy and will just kind of like sit on their own and play on their own for 45 minutes and go you use that time, be productive. But for the most part, you are going to have times where your baby's going to need you a lot to carry them and whatever. And I think baby wearing is very helpful for a while, but I have found that after a certain point, they just get so big that they're like kind of in the way. And yes, you can still like technically get your tasks done. But I just after a certain point, I can't really baby wear a whole lot because especially if they're, like, in the front, they're just, like, sticking out so much, and you just, like, can't really see in front of you very well, and then it has caused me, like, really bad tension migraines, when they've gotten really heavy because of, like, the straps and, like, wearing them for hours a day, it just, like, gets to be kind of a lot on your body, so but that is a solution if you have a super, super clingy baby, is figuring out the baby wearing situation. The last main pain point I want to talk about is might ruffle some feathers because it's not particularly something that new mothers want to hear because, again, you're in a vulnerable state of recovering. You have a lot going on mentally, probably physically and emotionally. But that is repenting of sin. And this is sometimes the last thing that we tend to think about. Sometimes we can kind of look around at our home and it's just in this very chaotic state. And we can just be like, oh, it's just because I've just had like a really hard few months because of the baby and because of the baby this and because of the baby that. But I think there should come a time where we examine ourselves and ask the Lord to reveal sin in our heart and in our habits. So, the first thing that I would probably examine yourself on is if things are not where they should be in your home management because of pride. So, if you and your children are home most of the day, most days of the week, your house is going to look like people live there, and it's supposed to. But we need to know the difference between a reasonably messy house and a perpetually dirty house. So, is your house veering on the edge of a pigsty and you're not willing to ask for help because of pride? Like, yes, obviously, it is our duty to take care of our homes. We should be shouldering, again, most, if not all, of the responsibility of the cleaning and the cooking and taking care of the things around the home that make it run so that the people there can have a safe, peaceful, um, discipling environment to live in. But I feel like this issue can become sin when you feel like your house has never been even reasonably clean for many months or even years because you feel like you're the only one who should be doing it. But the problem is you aren't. So you need to outsource. This is where bringing in help, even if it's in the form of professional help, sometimes we need the heavy hitters to come in and help us to overhaul our home to a place where you have a better foundation to work up off of. And you have to know when you are not enough anymore and you need help. So get it. You can't rely so much on, well, it's my responsibility, it's my duty, and da 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 da. But if it's not getting done, it's not getting done. And so sometimes you have to reach a point um, where you have to say, okay, I know the place I'm in my life right now. I've been saying I'm going to get to it. I'm going to get to it. I'm going to get to it. I'm going to get to it for months or even years, and you haven't got to it. You maybe need to not be the one that does it for a time and you need to let somebody else do it and get you to a baseline that you can work off of. Another thing is, are things falling apart because of laziness? Are we self-indulging a little bit too much and using postpartum as an excuse? Kind of like it's because of the baby, because of the baby, because of the baby, and everything is because of the baby. And sometimes things really are because of the baby, and other times it could not be the baby, it could just be us. Are we relying too much on others to pick up our slack, and when we can't get help, we whine? So I see this happen a lot, especially, I know you guys know what I'm talking about online with moms. My husband doesn't help, da 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 da, and he should be helping, and he lives here too, and all this stuff. But really, especially if he is working outside of the home, or just working in general, um, you should be the one to shoulder most of those tasks. And even if you are also working, it is still your responsibility to make sure those things get done or figure out who is going to do them and when. You cannot balk at your husband for not doing X, Y, and Z because you couldn't get up early enough that day to do the extra work that you were wanting to do because you were up too late or whatever it is. Insert X, Y, and Z situation. And so obviously there's never a good reason to whine and complain and balk at your husband, period. But this is a pretty common one that I see, especially with new mothers, with little babies. And again, I'm not talking about you being 5 days postpartum and, you need a little extra help. Like, obviously you do. I'm talking about when you're further out from having your baby and you can do the work, but your priorities were not ordered correctly. And now your home is suffering because of it, because you decided to take on a new house project when really you should have been getting some laundry done. Um, Another one is perfectionism. So, are we sinning by letting perfectionism get in our way of productivity? Are we relying on our own efforts and works to make everything exactly as it should be? And this can kind of go hand in hand with the person who over plans and over engineers the whole system, but they don't even work the system. It doesn't matter if your home managing is perfect. It will never be. It can never be on this side of heaven. It just can't. There is no way for you to get your perfect routine and all this stuff in order for you to be a worthy enough homemaker. Again, you're putting too much stock in your own works, in your own efforts. And do we know and live in a way that understands we need the Lord to help us? We can't do everything on our own. Our efforts will never be enough without Him, and we should work unto the glory of God. And I really love what Marla Silly says, who's the fly lady, by the way. And she says, I might botch this up, but she says something like to the effect of, cleaning done imperfectly still blesses your family, or something like that, something along those lines. And sometimes I really do have to say that quote in my head as I'm taking 5 minutes to vacuum maybe, I don't know, 18 square feet in my house. Because sometimes we kind of like can take it as an all or nothing approach. Like, if I can't vacuum the whole house, I'm just not going to vacuum at all. Or if I can't have a perfectly planned meal, gourmet dinner, I'm just not going to cook at all. Like, there needs to be some leeway, a little bit of compromise. And that is how you work little tidbits at a time, which is most likely going to be your situation if you have a baby. Like I was saying, a lot of days are going to be lucky if you get 10 minutes to do some extra deep cleaning that is outside of your bare bones routine. So, my final thoughts with all this: you need to pray and ask the Lord to bless your work every day. He cares for our day to day tasks and duties. He cares about your laundry and your dishes and the meals that need to be made and the groceries that need to be ordered and the medicine that needs to go be picked up and the appointments that need to be made. He cares about those things. And I think sometimes um, we can think of the Lord as, somebody who just sees our life as a big picture. And He does. He sees our whole life all the way through. He knows He's ordained everything already for us. He's allotted all of our troubles for this day right here and right now. But sometimes we forget that He's also allotted our trouble for this very minute, for this very 10 seconds, and that even the small picture things still matter to Him. So pray and ask the Lord to bless your work. Another thing is meditating on some verses, write them out where you frequent in your home, and I have a few ideas for you. And I'll just read them out loud. First one is a really popular one when it comes to work. It's Colossians 3:23 through 24. And it says, "And whatever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance, for you serve the Lord Christ." Another one is Psalms 90:16 through 17. And it says, "Let your work appear to your servants, and your glory to their children. And let the beauty of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands for us. Yes, establish the work of our hands." Another one is Philippians 2:14 through 16. And it says, "Do all things without complaining and disputing, that you may become blameless and harmless, children of God without fault, in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world, holding fast the word of life, so that I may rejoice in the day of Christ, that I have not run in vain or labored in vain." Another one is Ecclesiastes 2:22 through 24. And it says, "For what has man for all his labor, and for the striving of his heart with which he has toiled under the sun? For all his days are sorrowful, and his work burdens him. Even in the night his heart takes no rest. This also is vanity. Nothing is better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw was from the hand of God." If you are working diligently unto the Lord, your efforts, however small they seem or may seem, are not in vain. Um, and this can be the 5 minutes you take to do a little bit of extra cleaning, the 5 minutes you take to plan one extra meal in your week, the 5 minutes it takes to prepare a little extra something, to maybe finally make a homemade dessert that night. Like, it can be any small thing, but those things, if you're working diligently unto the Lord, they are not going to be in vain. They're going to be for His glory. Do you have any thoughts on any points that I made? I know there was a lot to cover.
No, I really appreciate everything that you talked about, especially the really sensitive topics, because I feel like you're right. Like when we're in an emotionally vulnerable position in and whatever that may be in life, the last thing we want is to be confronted with potential sin issues.
Yeah.
And I just think like you handled it very graciously. And I really think that all of us, when we're experiencing any sort of transition in our life, or like,
Mhm.
your family just moved, or you or your
Mhm.
children are experiencing illness, long term illness, like
Mhm.
these are great principles for a lot of situations, not just postpartum. But I really did
Yes.
appreciate your particular call to new mothers to not buy in to a lot of the worldly attitudes of today.
Mhm. Mhm.
I feel like if we weren't constantly confronted by relatable mom content, um, we wouldn't fall into these sins as easily. But because we're almost given permission by other
Yeah.
women
Yeah.
to behave a certain way, or to complain about our husbands, or even just be bitter towards them in our hearts, in
Mhm.
these situations, like it really does, like it gives us permission, and then we just do it. And
Mhm.
I think that taking that permission away of like,
Mhm.
listen, like you're saying, like, listen, I'm a mom too. It is hard. These are things that I struggle with, but we are set apart. We're called to be set
Yeah.
apart. We're not to be like the world. And therefore, our postpartum experiences should
Good.
look different.
Yes. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
should. It just
Mhm.
genuine every type of new season, and how we handle suffering, or how we handle new experience in life, should always look different than a
Yeah.
non-Christian. And
Yeah.
so that's the only thing I really have to add is just amen. And I hope that that I'm ready to hear these things, and I will re-listen to your episode when I'm in this season of life one day. But
Yeah, yeah. And I have noticed like in a lot of Christian circles, there is a call to like the not being lazy in your homemaking, like going the extra mile, going above and beyond, and trusting that the Lord will provide the energy that you need to do the extra work and that sort of thing, which is good, which is why I talked about that is one um ditch that you can fall into. But I feel like I haven't really heard a whole lot the other side, which is when we choose to take on too much and are not willing to um to admit that we need help and to actually go get the help because of our pride. I feel like that is not something I hear talked about a whole lot
Mhm.
either. And it could just be because maybe it's a little bit more of a rare circumstance. But
Right.
I feel like like certain personality types can maybe fall into that category a little bit easier because
Yeah.
they do want to be able to do it all, which is good. You should be striving to take the next step, to take on more of the load. But we really have to um, look in the mirror and like face reality of what the current situation is. And it's, I shouldn't be here. I don't want to be here, but I am. And so, what does that mean for me right now, today?
Mhm.
And how can I help myself out of this
Yes.
situation without shouldering all of this responsibility that really shouldn't maybe all be in my hands right now because I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be? Um,
Exactly.
the last thing I wanted to say is that I am going to be posting a blog post on our Patreon about how I plan almost my entire life.
I
and
love it. I'm excited.
one of our patrons specifically asked that I go into a little bit more detail because I did do a bonus episode last week, I think,
Mhm.
on my weekly planning routine, but I have quite a lot of moving parts going on in my life, as I know a lot of homemakers do. You have a lot of tabs open in your brain and a lot of things to keep track of and to stay on top of. And so, my planning, and I have, physical things like notebooks, I have digital planning systems and routines and things that I refer back to on a very regular basis that I do. I'm going to do a full blown, as detailed as I can blog post. So if you're interested in that, subscribe to our Patreon so that you can get that extra content if you're needing something a little bit more detailed when it comes to the planning
Yeah.
portion of homemaking.
Awesome. Yeah, I know so many people are going to appreciate that because sometimes we need to learn how to get things out of our brain and onto
Yes.
paper
Yeah.
so that we can move forward and not be
Yes.
so overwhelmed and crowded in our brain.
Yeah. The mental clutter.
Yes. Well, thank you, Marcella, for all of your wisdom in today's episode. I know it's going to bless so many people, and it blessed me. So, guys, next week we're going to be talking about alternative medicine, which was also a Facebook group request. So we have listened to you guys, and we're going to talk all about alternative medicine, what we think about it, our experiences. So stay tuned for that. We will talk to you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.